60 hurt, most of them school children, in a collision between a lorry and a coach. 15 years at the helm of the Labour Party, Dick Spring announces he's stepping down. Opening moves in the contest to replace him, 2 deputies declare their candidacy. And French truckers pile on the pressure as hopes grow of success in negotiations. Good evening and welcome. 60 people were injured when a lorry jackknifed and crashed into a school coach on the Chapel Izard bypass in West Dublin late this afternoon. 10 of the children had to be cut free by fire crews. The bus had been taking 75 children home from an outing to a Dublin theatre. 5 people are still in hospital, but none is thought to be in a serious condition. There are unconfirmed reports that a horse had strayed onto the bypass.
It could have been a huge tragedy, but it was miraculously averted. 75 school children and 3 adults were travelling on this bus after attending a play in Dublin. At 4:45 this afternoon, as they were heading west towards Palmerstown on the outer lane, a fully loaded truck coming down the other side slew into the double-decker bus. The bus ended up on the embankment. By a fluke of gravity, it didn't topple over. 10 of the teenagers from Salesian College in Selbridge were trapped in the bus. Others were able to scramble clear with minor cuts and bruises. 2 people in a pickup truck had to be cut free. The driver of the lorry was also taken to hospital. The scene of devastation was so serious that Gardaí were on the brink of putting the rarely used Dublin emergency plan into action. There are reports that a horse had strayed onto the bypass, causing the 30-ton loaded truck to swerve and jackknife into the double-decker bus. By a miraculous coincidence, there were traffic police doing a speed check nearby. They were on the scene within seconds.
Dublin Fire Brigade and emergency services arrived and did absolutely great job getting everybody out, and it was completed in the shortest time possible.
30 of the injured were taken to James Connolly Memorial Hospital in Blanchardstown, 19 were admitted to the Meath, and 11 were taken to St James's, both in Dublin. Some were suffering from head injuries, others from cuts and shock. But the parents of the children must be aware tonight that it could have been a lot worse.
Dick Spring has confirmed that he's resigning as leader of the Labour Party. Mr Spring, who has led the party for almost 15 years, said the time had come to pass the leadership to someone else. His deputy, Rory Quinn, and the party whip, Brendan Howlin, have said they'll be candidates in the leadership election, which takes place next week. Dick Spring is to remain a TD, and he intends to contest his North Kerry seat at the next election.
How are you feeling this morning, anyway?
How am I feeling?
Yes.
Well, it's a big day in one respect in terms of 15 years of leading the party, but I feel I'm making the right decision.
With his wife Christy by his side this morning, Dick Spring finally confirmed that he had taken the decision to stand down as Labour leader after 15 years. A short time later, Mr Spring emerged from Leinster House with some of his party colleagues on their way to the Parliamentary Party meeting, where he would make the formal announcement. But before that, he explained to the waiting media corps why he had taken the decision.
I would say to you, in fairness, that over the 15 years, I think you've got value for money.
All right. Why have you taken the decision?
Well, primarily, I suppose, it's 15 years as leader. It's a long time. Despite how fit and young-looking I am, I still think that it has taken its toll. I've had excellent cooperation from my party, particularly my party in North Kerry, the organisation North Kerry, my family. And I think it is time to pass on the baton. There's a job of work to be done for the Labour Party leading into the millennium. That will require energy, dedication, long hours, and I suppose to a large extent I feel I've done it for 15 years and I'm happy to hand over.
When did you finally take the decision? Was it after the presidential election?
No, about 11:10 this morning.
But seriously, I mean, was it as a result of what happened?
I said, no, not particularly, no. Irrespective of the presidential election, I think I was very conscious that on the 28th of October, it would have been 15 years. And you may say, why 15 rather than 20 or 13 for that matter. But I don't know, maybe because I played in teams of 15 a lot, 15 had a certain ring about it.
Already 2 candidates have emerged to replace Mr Spring, Rory Quinn and Brendan Howlin, but neither was saying very much today.
Today's the day for Dick Spring. I think he will receive tremendous praise from every section of the party, and that's what's happened in the last number of days. What's going to happen immediately after that, obviously, is a contest to replace him, and I will be a contender in that contest, yes.
I've no indication of any other candidate. Michael D. Higgins has indicated that he will not be a candidate, or has indicated that it's most unlikely that he will be a candidate, and I'm taking that as a denial that he will be a candidate. So it looks, as of now, this evening, Wednesday afternoon, as if it's going to be 2 candidates on a vote that will take place on Thursday week, tomorrow week.
This evening, in an interview with Una Claffey, Mr Spring said he would like to see greater cooperation between Labour and Democratic Left.
It wouldn't be a question of anybody taking anybody over. I do, in the first instance, believe there should be much closer cooperation. There is now a very healthy level of respect between the 2 parties because we work together in government. And I would say my relationship with Prince Ross is an excellent one, which it wasn't 4 or 5 years ago. And he has his own strong views, but I think let the parties work together, let them work closely together, and who knows, in the medium term, they may well be able to have a realignment.
There have been traditionally difficulties of a sort of personal or personality nature on the left. There were times when there were particular difficulties between yourself and Brunchester Rossa, albeit before you went into government together. But do you think that your departure and making way for a new leader might lessen that type of tension between you?
Well, I have to say to you that I don't believe there's any tension there at the present time. I've set out the stalls, so to speak, and I would be confident that my successor will develop that. And I would hope that the membership of Democratic Left and the membership of the Labour Party could at least look at the options that are there for both of them.
And this evening at his final news conference as party leader, Mr Spring's wife Christy was asked about her feelings on his decision to resign.
I'm a bit sad. I thought I'd be more delighted. I'm very proud of him. And I look forward to the rest of our lives.
And for the man himself, well, he's on his way to the backbenches.
I've never served as a backbencher, and it's taken me 16 years to become a backbencher, which is probably typical of the Kerry man to take 16 years to become a backbencher.
Many tributes have been paid to the Labour leader. Politicians from all the main parties said Mr Spring had left an important legacy both nationally and internationally.
Speaking from government buildings tonight, the Taoiseach Bertie Ahern said both Mr Spring and his party should look back on his period of leadership with pride and satisfaction.
His great contribution from his party point of view was bringing it forward, settling the differences that were there, developing it. And more importantly, internationally, I think his work in the US, in the UN, on the peacekeeping missions, and of course at home in our own Northern Ireland.
The Fine Gael leader praised Mr Spring's contribution to the peace process and said he possessed all the qualities of leadership.
It was very successful because he identified the Labour Party with the modernisation of Ireland in the 1990s. He also was an extremely good minister and leader. He had a capacity to stay cool in a crisis, to think strategically, and at the same time he had a sense of humour.
The leader of Democratic Left described Mr Spring as a pivotal figure in Irish political life and said he looks forward to working with the new Labour leader. While Dr Garrett Fitzgerald said no one should underestimate Mr Spring's achievements in the peace process.
And then this whole issue of the peace possibility arose, and he had to work with John Hume and Albert Reynolds. Now just how they worked together and what role each played, history will tell us eventually, but I think Dick Spring's role seemed to have been a very significant one in keeping things on an even keel throughout that very difficult and very important period. He's a very entertaining person, private, and I did think that in the last couple of years, he often looked very, sad, almost grim at times, very unlike the real Dick Spring.
Well, Dick Spring led the Labour Party for 15 years. Before entering politics, he rose to national prominence on the rugby field. Margaret Ward has been looking back at that long political career.
Dick Spring was just 32 when he became leader of the Labour Party. He had served just a year in Dáil Éireann when he won the post after the resignation of Michael O'Leary. Within a month of becoming party leader, he was back in government with Fitzgerald as Taoiseach and Minister for Energy. The coalition struggled from one crisis to another. The Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1985, one of its few successes. It was a difficult time for the new leader, not helped by an earlier car crash in which he badly injured his back. In 1987, Labour pulled out of government, ostensibly over the draft budget. In the election that followed, Spring survived in North Kerry by just 4 votes. Out of government, he turned attention to his own ranks. Party conferences in the 80s became a battleground between Spring and the militant tendency. Spring finally won out.
Give us bread, but give us roses.
Spring had succeeded in moving Labour towards the centre. It was time to move on.
Now and for the future, Labour is leading the opposition.
These were the years of Goodman, Greencore and the telecom site. Spring became a thorn in Charlie Haughey's side.
It is ultimately a debate about the cancer that is eating away at our body politic and the virus which has caused that cancer on Taoiseach Charles J. Haughey.
His decision to put Mary Robinson forward for the presidency in 1990 and her subsequent electoral success gave Labour a much-needed shot in the arm.
Look, I've never had so many cameras in all my life.
As the country went to the polls in 1992, Dick Spring was the most popular party leader. The Spring Tide returned 33 TDs and Dick Spring was kingmaker. Despite his earlier antipathy, Spring went into government with Fianna Fáil. He and Albert Reynolds worked on the Downing Street Declaration, and in August 1994 the IRA declared a ceasefire. But beneath the surface the coalition was showing signs of strain. The government finally fell apart in November 1994 over the Brendan Smith-Harry Wheelahan affair. But there was no election. A rainbow deal involving Fine Gael and Democratic left was hammered out. Spring was back in foreign affairs. In 4.5 years, he developed a reputation as an astute foreign minister, the highlight a successful presidency of the EU. Then, with the economy booming, the rainbow went to the country in June of this year. Labour ministers had pushed through a raft of reforms, but Spring knew he would lose seats. The party was devastated, its representation halved. The performance of Eddie Roche underlined the party's fragile vote base. It was time to begin building all over again. In 15 years, Spring took his party to heights it could only have dreamt of. But for his wife Christy and his family, there was always a personal price to be paid. His personal style was always difficult to define. Witty, arrogant, clever, tough were just some of the words used to describe him. Now at 47, he's joined the growing number of politicians who've decided there are other things in life besides politics. But few will be surprised if he ends up playing again for Ireland on some foreign field.